Take one.
Now, talking about the book, which I found A, a very moving book, and B, a salutary book in terms of many of the things it revealed to me about myself. It ends on a very depressing note, personally, and yet throughout the book there are flashes of insight which are humorous in nature. I'm wondering if really you are as depressed as the book seems to indicate at the end, because there seems to be a bubbling sense of humor that comes in again and again in the book.
Well, it's not exactly that I'm depressed, it's that it is the story of total failure, total humiliation, and therefore it would be unwise to sort of perk up at the end and make it, and give it a happy ending of any kind. I mean, the life of anyone who lives to be 60 cannot really have a happy ending, since the happy time is earlier than this. That's almost inevitable.
Now, there is a sense in which I would think at this point you would probably be in a position to advise, in the present situation, people who had your problems, who would have had your problems 40 years ago, who now have them in the 1960s. Is there anything that you would advise them to do to some extent obviate the kind of failures you feel in yourself?
Well, part of my failure, of course, is something that won't happen to other people, because the failure was social. When there is no opprobrium, when there is no humiliation heaped on homosexuals from outside, they will cease to have to confirm or deny. Unfortunately, of course, toleration has come in a form that is slightly insulting. That is to say, one imagined the message when it came would read, "Forgive us for having for so long allowed our prejudices to blind us to your true worth, and cross our unworthy threshold with your broad-minded feet." Instead, the message now reads, "Oh, come in, the place is a mess, you'll love it."
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. You also make a point of what many people are saying about legislation in terms of racial tolerance, that there is very little point in legislation which doesn't carry people along with it in terms of persuasion. Are there methods you can think of that would be helpful in this sense? It seems to me, oddly, we've been trying to think of the name of Peter Wildeblood's first book.
Outside the Law.
Outside the Law, that was it. Was it? That was the second one, was it? In any event, now, that book, which also struck me as being a very moving document, and I think was partly responsible for a report which helped, nevertheless didn't carry people with it. Are there any methods that you can think of? Are there people you know of who are prepared to try and persuade people, heterosexual people, to the kind of welcome that you indicated earlier should have been?
No. You see, this is where we come to something I think I mention in the book, which I call Bridget Brophy's first law. Enlightenment does not produce tolerance. Tolerance is the result of boredom. The facts have to be repeated over and over and over. And in the end, people say, "All right, so you're queer, just talk about something else." And then the work is done. And this is the work, of course, of time, not of people, and not of legislation. Legislation makes almost no difference. It is the result of public opinion. You can't really force, especially in England, a law upon a people who is totally against it, because they will get round it. The more laws you have, the more fixers and the more snoopers.
You're saying, in effect, that really you have to bore people to death with the facts.
With the facts, and then toleration sets in.
Now, there are a lot of very revealing things in the book about homosexuality itself. there are areas in which not only our prejudices but our misinformation has led us to believe there are pacts between groups of people, and because there are pacts, therefore fears are set up, and everything wrong comes from fear. But I mean, I know one such example. There is a fear abroad that homosexuals believe that because they are not, and that there is a group effort in this sense, I am told, because they are not concerned with reproduction of their species, they therefore have a sense of detachment about other things in life, which probably would make them very good leaders, rulers. Is there any truth in this at all?
I wouldn't say they would be great leaders because it's very hard for them to care about other people. In fact, since among male homosexuals so many have slightly or totally feminine minds, they tend to be concerned with themselves first and then their group, their family, their friends, and rather than with the world. A world grasp, I think, is unusual in anyone who's totally outside. You have to come in first and be with the people and then go out and tell them what to do. If you've never known them, you can't really do this.
And there has been a tendency not to want to know them, except on the most superficial level, or in terms of the arts, for example, one can admire, but still slightly patronize.
Yes, I think the patronage of normal people to homosexuals is still inevitable. That too will pass, of course. Already we're moving, you know, Mr. Bronowski invented the arrow of time, which points always in the direction of diminishing difference. This seems to me a wonderful thing to have said. And of course it's here. Once there was a difference between the classes, then there was a difference between the sexes. Now there's almost none. You can only speak of actions as being homosexual. And repeated actions lead to a homosexual life. But the idea of a homosexual person is passing. Even the homosexuals themselves have ceased to think of themselves as being a special group, a people apart. They're allowed to mix with the real world, and so they tend to do so. And so the edges pass for a lot of them. And a person could now actually say, oh, I used to be homosexual then, but I don't bother now, or I've given it up, or I'm homosexual some of the time, or I did enter into a liaison at that time, but I can't think why, or I've changed my opinions or my habits.
But basically I'm a person.
But basically I'm a person.
Now there's one thing that arises out of this. My wife, who is an actress, has always maintained that homosexuals really are the only people who can write women's parts, because heterosexual men are basically antagonistic towards women as minds, as opposed to a physical thing, and that only a homosexual man can become friendly with women to the extent that he understands them, and therefore people like Noel Coward, Terence Rattigan, tend to write women better than heterosexual males.
I can imagine this to be so, especially in England, because in England to be a woman is already a disgrace. Normal Englishmen don't really like them. I mean, a country which addresses a woman as old girl can't really have a very high opinion of them. Whereas in, say, America, where a woman is called honey and sugar, all this is quite different. At least his attitude towards them is cozy, even if it's faintly condescending.
And yet Americans are worried about becoming a matriarchal society.
Yes, I think they are, and I think they're right. Here, we shan't have a matriarchal society. We hardly have, I mean, it's so hard for a woman to come out and to be the equal of men and to be accepted in any way, that I think this won't happen. But I think homosexuals, on the whole, contrary to what people imagine, like women and like the society of women, because neither party has anything to lose, and therefore can write these parts for women. And I don't think their attitude is catty. I think they write sympathetic parts. The great example, of course, is Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams' plays are all about the same thing, how terrible it is to be a woman. First of all, how terrible it is to be so ruined as Blanche Dubois. Then how terrible it is to be so betrayed as the woman in The Rose Tattoo, or to be as crippled as the woman in The Glass Menagerie. This is really his whole message. And this, of course, I secretly think, is because he is a woman crippled and betrayed.
We'll cut that right there. That's marvelous. Wonderful. Thank you very much.